I serve as the editor of the COABE Journal. And I am pleased to be joined today by some of the authors for our current edition on financial literacy and adult education. The COABE Journal is published twice a year, and it is a theme-based journal. And we put out calls for articles, and we have responses from folks like these authors here to submit articles on the topic. And so we have a variety of topics that are covered in the 4 articles that are represented here. And so we're going to take just a little bit of time first to get to know each of the authors. So they're going to introduce themselves to you, and then we'll go into a question and answer. Start with you.
I'm Amanda Jennings. I'm a researcher at eduCASE, which is the Center for Adult and Continuing Education. I have been working in adult education for just about a year now, but before that, my work was with a different kind of adult learners, educators in the K-12 system.
Amanda, well, let's talk about your article first. Adult Financial Education, What Do and Don't We Know About Fostering Financial Capability and Well-Being? This particular article, I think it has a lot of relevance to the folks in our field. And so let me ask you, from the author's perspective, what's the main driver of this article?
Well, I come to adult education, as I mentioned, with some experience outside of adult ed in the K-12 system and also in the post-secondary system as an educator. And I find that in the adult education space, we're borrowing heavily from the research that we know about financial literacy education in the K-12 system and also in the post-secondary system, but there's not a robust body of literature and research within adult education. And so I think that what we have done in adult education in developing standards and in developing curriculum and materials and programs and resources has been really amazing because it's relied on the experience and the knowledge of the practitioners in a really impressive way. And now we have an opportunity, because of that great body of practice, to think amongst ourselves, like, what is working? And how is it working? Because the research actually doesn't tell us that. And this is essential because regardless of an adult's educational attainment, regardless of whether or not they have a high school credential, or regardless of what language they speak, they all participate in our financial system. And they all are required to do things like file taxes and things like that. And when they don't have access or they don't understand the access they have, it's really creating an inequitable system. And so we have an opportunity here to build collaborative relationships between researchers and practitioners to ask and answer questions.
So one of the resources that you talked about in your article was the Routledge Handbook.
Yeah.
And that particular handbook, you talked about 8 recommendations that came from that. So can you kind of talk a little bit about how your research is supported by or supports those 8?
Yeah, so I would say the first thing is that knowing your students is one of the recommendations in that handbook. And I think that that's important for practitioners, but it's also important for researchers. So as researchers, we should engage educators and learners not as participants in our research, but partners in our research. And what does that look like? It means involving them and, like, what are the outcomes that matter in financial education? Is it a specific behavior? Is it knowledge? Or is it something deeper like financial well-being? And how do we measure whether or not our programs are achieving those aims?
Great. So as somebody reading your article who is perhaps in the classroom or maybe an administrator of the program, what's the takeaway you want them to have?
I want them to take away that their insight and their knowledge and their experience is really valuable. And through an organization like COABE that has diverse stakeholders and contributors and constituents, that we should come together as researchers and learners and educators and find ways to study what's working in adult financial education, and then maybe what it is that we want to leave behind and move forward with.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.